Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Lean in Olympia. I'm very excited to be with you today. My name is Corey Passons. I'm the Director of Interfaith Relations with Interfaith Works. Interfaith Works is a coalition of 30-plus diverse faith congregations and affiliated organizations. We're also one of the region's largest social service providers to vulnerable adults experiencing homelessness. And we've recently opened up a 26-bed permanent supportive housing unit on Capitol Way, formerly the Olympia Inn, now called Sandy's Flats. So we're very active in the area, providing care in alignment with our mission. And this podcast is a monthly podcast where we extend ourselves into conversations that are at the crossroads of humanity, justice, and belief. You can find past episodes of Lean in Olympia in various places on our YouTube channel, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to follow and subscribe so you never miss a new episode. And check out our website at interfaith-works.org or find us on Facebook to stay up to date with what's going on with us. And I want to welcome our guest today, Joe Seymour. Welcome. Hello, good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Corey. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really glad you're here today. I'm looking forward to our conversation. And I'll just give some brief bio material, some intro material, so people can start to appreciate you and as we start our conversation. And I also want to name that would love to have some links to access your work and your portfolio or whatever's happening most currently with you that we can put into our social media feeds. So we'll work on getting those appropriate links connected with this podcast as well. Joe is the son of Joe Senior and Faye Seymour. We'll be talking about them later, too, in our conversation. Born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and is of Squaxin Island and Pueblo of Acoma tribal ancestry. His artistic journey began in 2003, but possibly before that. We'll see as the conversation unfolds, wherein he carved his first bentwood box and paddle. And it was near that time that he also learned to stretch and make drums. Joe says, in my career, I've worked with glass, photography, Salish wool weaving, prints, wood, and rawhide drums. I've been very fortunate to have a community of artists that I'm able to work with and that are very supportive of my career. If it were not for their caring and sharing of ideas, I would not be the artist that I am today. I love that quote. It contains so much of the spectrum of your work and also your sense of your community and how you belong in community, and something I want to talk about today. His work can be seen in the Portland Art Museum, the Burke Museum in Seattle, Squaxin Island Museum, Learning and Resource Center in Shelton, Washington, and the Hilo Art Museum in Hilo, Hawaii. Joe's been a recipient of the Native Arts Grant from the Potlatch Fund. He has also been the recipient of the National Native Creative Development Program from the Longhouse at Evergreen State College, as well as the Visual Art Program grant from the National Museum for the American Indian. And we'll also talk about some of your public installations here in Olympia, which I think one of the just hallmarks of those being the salmon on the views on Fifth Building. So we'll get to that later. So that's just a snapshot. Thanks for offering that to us. And then I wanted to start with, at the beginning, tell us about your journey. Where are you from? This indicates you're from Albuquerque, but a place is just part of where we're from. So
my mom is from Acoma, my dad is from Squaxin, and they met. My dad came back from the Vietnam War. My mom had just graduated from high school, so they met in San Francisco, kind of in the middle. And my two older sisters were born out in Berkeley, and then I guess Acoma was building houses on the reservation back in New Mexico, and so they had a house built in '72, and they moved back to New Mexico in '72. Had my third oldest sister in '72, and then I was born in '73. So I grew up in New Mexico. In a little village called Bacardi's on the Acoma reservation. My dad was in the Marines still, so in '83 we moved to Oceanside, California, at Camp Pendleton, where he was stationed. So I grew up there for from 4th grade to 9th grade.
It's a big change culturally,
yeah.
geographically, all that.
All my developmental years, were in California. So, and then once he retired from the Marines, we moved back to New Mexico. Spent some time in Albuquerque. Joined the Marines in '91, straight out of high school. Spent my 4 years, got out, moved back to New Mexico, and I didn't feel like I belonged there. It just kind of felt odd. So, loaded up everything I owned in my Mustang, and moved back to California where I was stationed. But it was, once again, I didn't feel like I belonged there. And plus, I couldn't afford to live out there. It's crazy expensive.
Yeah.
So I moved up here to Olympia. And it's like, okay, I always loved coming up here on vacation. I knew who my family was up here, but I really didn't know them that well. So, I took that opportunity to.
Had you even visited?
Yeah.
Here growing up? Yeah. Okay.
We'd come on family vacation.
Yeah. Okay.
So there used to be the old Yardbirds just north of us, and there used to be like a swap meet in that area too. So I remember walking around there. I remember going over to the coast out into Tahola, on the Quinault Res. So I knew my family here. They knew me, but like I said, I really wasn't terribly familiar with them. So moved up here in '96. And, it just felt like I belonged here. So, the idea of really living anywhere else, was always, not like on the forethought. So, and I really just enjoyed being out here.
And I'm curious too. I mean, many of us listening and watching will probably be familiar with what, it feels like to live in the Northwest. But what does it feel like to live on the Acoma reservation or that part of the world? How is it different just from here?
It's so dry. Well, you're in the middle of the desert, and everything is just so brown and sandy and dirt everywhere. And when I was younger, I really didn't appreciate, the beauty of the land. I just saw all the annoyances. So, all these little stickers, all these thorns that get on your socks, and just, the hotness. I'm not a big fan of the heat. My sinuses would always dry up, so I'd get bloody noses occasionally out of nowhere.
Is there some elevation too down there?
No, not really the elevation, it's just the dryness.
Just dry.
So,
yeah.
I really don't miss that. When you stretch your mouth out a little bit, you feel your nasal passages just crack. I don't miss that at all. So, or having to drink a gallon of water a day so you stay hydrated. Not a big fan of that. So, it's just two totally different areas, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
And I do miss the food. So I love the chili.
The chili.
And I love the mutton. So I miss that. Of course, I miss my family, but I still got family here. But it's hard being from two places, or having a foot in two different cultures at the same time. So, so there's always a trade off.
Yeah.
Trying to find out what you love to be, or where you love to be, and what you love to do.
Well, who were the people there? Who are the people there that really influenced you and that were a part of your formation that you would name?
Yeah, no, my grandma, my Auntie Elizabeth, and my mom. Those are probably the big three. My mom was a Head Start teacher over in the next village over in Acoma, and she essentially helped educate a whole generation of children, and I was included in that. And when it came time for me to go to Head Start, she was my Head Start teacher. And the Head Start in Acoma was within walking distance of my grandma's house. So I'd get out of school, or even before I probably went to school, my grandma was watching me because I'm right next door, basically, to the school. And I remember, just being under my grandma's table in her kitchen and just watching her cook. And then also same thing with my Aunt Elizabeth. She took over that house once my grandma passed away. And it was the same thing. I just remember sitting around her table, just watching her cook, watching her paint. She was a pottery painter. She made traditional Acoma pottery. And the same thing with my mom. She was she painted ceramics. So, just watching them paint, and then listen to them talk about painting or talk about design. Yeah, no, those are my earliest influences.
Yeah.
And then same thing growing up. Listening to my mom talk about design or talk about ceramics or talk about materials. So and really at a younger age, I didn't really take to being or to doing arts or to drawing. I wasn't that great a drawer. So I never really took it up. So it wasn't until about 2006 I got serious about it.
But then at that time there was a connection back with your mom that we've talked about, and I want to get to that. But I'm curious, as we're still kind of in that area and in that time, on your bio you also mentioned that you were also named by your great grandfather. And I was wondering if you could describe what that means, how to understand when a naming like that happens, and what that name is for you in addition to or beyond the name Joe Seymour.
Yeah, no, in 2004, my cousin Melanie Hawes found this name, Wahalatsu, in an old document. And Wahalatsu was the ancestral name for my great-grandfather, William Bagley. And she said, because of who you are for the tribe and for the family, you should take this name, and you should carry this name. So I went to my uncles and my aunts and my older cousins, and I asked them, like, would it be okay if I took the name Wahalatsu? And everybody, gave me their blessing. And in 2004, Squaxin was having a naming ceremony / youth potlatch. And so, yeah, at that naming ceremony, the name Wahalatsu was placed on me. So, to carry an ancestral name is a huge honor. Not everybody has one. And it's usually marked by your accomplishments. Like my cousin said, it's because of who I am. I was a veteran. I was part of the canoe family. I was part of the drum group. I was learning the language, Lashutsi at the time. So, I was really standing up for my community. I was taking action to be an active part of my community. So, to have that name, to carry that name is a representation of your family. Literally, for me, because it's my great grandfather's name. And I don't carry that responsibility lightly. It's something that's a serious thing for me. So I don't just go out on occasion and trot out my name. It's who I am.
It's who you are.
It's who I want to live up to be. And so to have an ancestral name like that is, for me, it's a huge honor.
I think it's really amazing when that happened, the way you've described it, how it was you went to family and you wanted them to be like integrated into that process, and that they were, giving affirmation. And I just think that at the moment of your development as a person and in your own identity of who you already were and were becoming, that name probably was also just such an affirmation too. And I can't imagine the way that it's influenced who you've become because you received that. I mean, what a moment of synergy for you and your family.
No, like I said, it's a huge honor. It's a huge responsibility as well. So and the way of asking your older relatives, it's a sign of respect, for your family. So
thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate that. I am curious from that time, or maybe as you were, moving into life after being a Marine, when you were able to name or know some of the core values that are in your life, and maybe once you're able to know them, where do you think they came from? Like, who would you name, or what would you name that put those core values to a place where you say, yeah, that's I'm gonna own that.
Well, in 1994, I got sober and I started going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And so a lot of how I live my life comes from being around the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, it's no secret that I've been sober, since, 94.
Mm-hmm.
And, just a lot of what I learned on how to live sober, just comes out through my actions.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of, learning how to live with respect,
Mm-hmm.
learning how to live with humility, having principles that you live by and that and how you treat others.
Mm-hmm.
It's all based from the program of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, it's just how I want to live my life. And,
Yeah.
and I just want to be able to breathe
Mm-hmm.
without fear, without anger, without guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And all that comes from the program.
Comes from the program.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the program is two things. It's the literature, but it's also the people, that are there. And who, as you think about that, are there people that, were able to, that demonstrated that for you and you were able to see that and to be able to find community with them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. When I first got sober, you start working the steps, you start working with a sponsor. So my first sponsor, Dave, he showed me, the ropes basically, or he showed me how to, he walked with me through the steps.
Mm-hmm.
So, he's a huge part of how I learned how to live again.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I moved up here, my cousin Melanie,
Mm-hmm.
she was a huge part of the program here. She introduced me to a lot of people in the community, that weren't necessarily, native, but they're still, part of AA.
Mm-hmm.
Or she introduced me to, some natives who were in the program.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, we formed this bond, this community that, my friends that I made when I first moved here, they're still a huge part of my life today.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, we have this group of us that have achieved long-term sobriety. We get to show other people, what it means like to, to live a life of being sober.
Yeah.
And so.
So you mentioned your cousin.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, is this the same person earlier who researched this name? Okay,
Yeah.
This is a person who's been a pretty big part of your life.
Yeah, no, I mean, she growing up on vacations, we'd come. Her mom, my Auntie Lucille, she was a saint. And so, being around Auntie Lucille, being around my auntie or my cousin, Melanie, it was just, so comfortable. So when I moved up here and I learned that my cousin was sober and part of the program here, just that bond became a lot stronger. And,
yeah, that.
sometimes I just call her my sister. And I was really fortunate to have her be a part of my life for so long. Unfortunately, she passed away about 2 years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So so to have her not be a part or around anymore, is a huge loss. But she's the reason why I became a gooey ducker. I harvest gooey ducks with Squaxin because of her.
Yeah.
I was broke one day. My car wasn't running. I was selling my food stamps to get bus fare. So, and she said, go to Natural Resources, get on the list to learn how to learn how to dive so you can harvest gooey ducks. And then I did that. And then she goes, well, go meet this guy named Glenn Parker. He owns a boat. Him and his son, they harvest gooey ducks. They can show you how to harvest. So I did that. And I absolutely love diving. That was in 97. And I'm still doing that today. So.
And you worked as a commercial diver up until what, like 2004-ish or something like that, wasn't it?
Well, I went to the Divers Institute of Technology in 2001. And, for 2001 to 2006, I was working as a commercial diver, either in the Gulf of Mexico or, in the Ship Canal up in Seattle, Lake Washington, Lake Union. So, doing, repairing dry docks, working on houseboats, culverts. So doing dives like that.
Yeah. But connection to the water.
For real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And being in the water. I don't know. I've never had, the scuba apparatus or anything like that, just like literally diving. But I mean, it's pretty special being in the water and interacting that way.
Yeah, I've always appreciated my connection with the water.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so being underwater is like being in your own little world. You know, it's just you and the gooey ducks, and for me, it's almost meditative.
Mm-hmm.
So just to be underwater and just have that solitude.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we go down with a full face mask,
Mm-hmm.
so we're not scuba diving. We don't have the respirator, but we're still able to talk with the top side. There's a 300-foot umbilical.
Wow.
That contains our compressed air line, our communication line, a safety line, and what's called a pneumatic line, where it's just like they can turn on a valve and blow bubbles, pipe air through this line for whatever reasons.
And you're doing this work, so 2006, but then there's a point in your timeline around 2003 where there's this exposure, this connection with creating art. Yeah. And you name this as a point in your time where you say that you were learning that you wanted to dedicate your life to creating art. And that's such a that's a big, thing to say, and you're laughing. Why is that?
No, it's just it's a good memory to have that first time where you're learning how to create something from this plank of wood. My cousin Andrea Wilbur-Saigo, she's a phenomenal carver, a phenomenal artist.
Yeah.
And she was having these workshops.
I didn't realize she was your cousin. Oh, that's so good.
And so she's having these workshops of making bentwood boxes, or in 2002, Squaxin Island became involved with canoe journeys. Yeah. So they went on a journey in 2002 to Quinault. I was in the Gulf of Mexico at the time, so I didn't participate in that. But I came home in 2003, and everybody was planning for a canoe journey, and I wanted to be a part of that. So Andrea was having another workshop for carving paddles. And that's where I carved my first paddle. And then just spending 2 weeks in the canoe, just being on the water, being with
your paddle that you carved.
Yeah, and then being with my family. My dad had never been on a canoe journey, but he carved a paddle, and he spent the whole time in the canoe. And that's not an exaggeration. If the canoe was on the water, he was in that canoe.
He was in it,
and it was hard to he didn't even take breaks. He just kept pulling.
Wow,
it was like a machine. He was amazing. And I actually have that paddle that he carved on my wall. When he passed away, one of my sisters gave that paddle to me. So. I'm able to look at that paddle and I'm able to think of him.
Did you say that you two created those at the same time, or was his?
No, he created his paddle in New Mexico.
Okay.
And I created mine up in Shelton.
Here in 2003. Yeah. Was that before you did the bentwood box, or was that this first thing you did, or was it proximate to that time?
The bentwood box workshop was first, and then the paddle making workshop came second.
Those are two, hugely iconic central points of like culture for the Squaxin. Yeah. What were you thinking? What were you feeling as you were like literally touching, building, engaging this aspect of culture?
Well, it's just really like a sense of wonder. Like this, you get to smell the wood, and then when you carve into it, you get that fresh cedar smell again. And I always remember that smell of the cedar. And red cedar and yellow cedar have two distinct smells. So I remember both of those very cleanly. And we're sitting out in my cousin's backyard. With the first time having a knife in my hand, learning how to use that knife. You're learning how to look at the grain of the wood and know which direction to carve. That's like the foundation for learning how to make art. And so I remember that really well. So, or the process of curving out your curves for the bentwood box, and then putting it on a steam table to loosen up the edges so you can actually bend it. Wow. So yeah. 2003 was a huge turning point for me culturally, because I got to be a part of these workshops, and then I got to spend a part, the whole summer being in the canoe and that's when I really learned how to sing, traditional songs. Before that, I had no idea. And so after Canoe Journey, I started showing up to our drum group. And I didn't have a drum at the time. So I asked some of my other cousins, like, who makes drums? Who do you know that makes drums? Like, oh, your cousin Pokey. She knows how to make drums. So I called cousin Pokey up, bought the materials that we needed. And then, we sat down in my kitchen and she taught me how to make drums. That was like probably in October of 2003. And I remember that really well too, because I never really got to hang out with Pokey. And so she was telling me that, she learned how to make drums from our Uncle Phil. So this is like a family method of making drums.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That is a lot coming at you in a very condensed period of time.
Yeah, in about 6 months.
Yeah, that's a lot happening. I'm curious though, when you were back in New Mexico, you said you had no idea about singing. Was there singing there from that part of your family, or was that something that you didn't register or notice at the time?
Well, I mean, being Acoma, you go up to the old village, up on the mesa. Acoma sits on top of a 300-foot mesa, and there are still dances held up there today. So we'd go up there for the feast days, and we'd go up there for the dances. But I never really took part in any of those. To take part in those dances, you need to be initiated into one of the kivas. And I know I was never initiated into the kivas, so I never got to learn any of those songs or learn any of that dancing. So, learning how to sing up here is totally different than being a singer down there.
Is it more, I don't know what the word, like accessible here, or can you participate here with less of the sense of like having an initiated status?
I wouldn't say that. It's just that Acoma is more traditional than a lot of the tribes up here, just because we've had, these traditions go uninterrupted basically, since time immemorial. Whereas you come up here, a lot of the culture's been diluted, because of settler colonialism. And a lot of our culture was really decimated at the time of the treaty signing, or the late 1800s, when they split up Squaxin Island, or the bands around Squaxin. They shipped a lot of Squaxins off to Quinault or up to Puyallup, and so our culture was absorbed by the Quinaults and the Puyallups. And so really, to try to find, traditional songs from this area is kind of hard. So. A lot of what the songs that Squaxin sings have been passed on to us, either from Sobier, Bruce Miller from Skokomish, or from Lester Green's family in the village of Wyatch from Nia Bay, Macaw territory. There are still songs that come to us that we still sing. So, but it's just the more traditional dances and songs, that belong to sacred societies up here. That's like more of the smokehouse. And I never really got into the smokehouse. So a lot of what goes on in there, I'm not too familiar with.
Okay, so there's different, even more layers of culture that are near, but you haven't necessarily explored. I mean, you're busy enough, being a vessel for the culture that you've experienced. Yeah. Okay, so the singing. So then you started singing as well. That was starting to happen. But then when you're making this determination for your life, or I guess a word we could use is your vocation, your sense of your calling, your orientation. You're deciding you want to be an artist. What's that starting to look like in terms of your life? Like what's changing? Things are going to change for you. What started to happen?
Yeah, well, there was this big changing point in 2006. The Longhouse at Evergreen was hosting a series of residencies, and I got to attend a residency with Preston Singletary, the Slinkit glassblower based out of Seattle. And just over the course of 2 weekends, working with him and the other participants, it was literally life-changing. I had so much fun. I connected so much with whatever we were making. that after the workshops were over, I decided to become a professional artist. I called my boss up in Kirtland, and I told him, it's like, I quit. I'm a professional artist now.
So this was like kind of a binary thing. It wasn't like work at it for a little bit, transition out. And, okay, you just said I quit.
Yeah, no, I told him don't call me out for any more jobs. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And so I was living in a little house out by the Arcadia boat ramp out in Shelton, and I turned my kitchen or my dining room table into my workshop. And I started making more drums. I started carving more paddles, and the occasional working with sandblasted glass. But a lot of what I did, I dedicated toward becoming a professional artist. Yeah, it was craziness, I tell you.
Yeah, it's you went for it, as they say.
Yeah, no, I did. I developed that artist statement. A lot of what you read was my original artist statement.
It's kind of a manifesto, actually, and I look back on it, Yeah.
Yeah, and really everything that related to the Coast Salish culture, I wanted to learn. So that's why there's so many mediums I work with. In 2006, I started weaving because I was super interested in that. And I started off by making a 6 foot by 6 foot loom that I had in my living room, and I started weaving tunics that we wear for potlatches and ceremony. And then in like 2007, I decided to weave a blanket. This big 6 foot by 6 foot wool blanket. And I started working with Susan Pavel from she's married to Michael Pavel from Skokomish. Okay. So she's part of the Skokomish community. And, she got her teachings from Sobier. And so her weaving knowledge is just immense. And so to have her be a part of my community now is a huge honor. Yeah. So, just working with Susan and just learning from her has been a blessing for me.
And your job then is now gone, and so there's more time. And so your availability to take in and to start to process and to build and grow has gone way up.
Yeah, luckily the gooey ducking was able to supplement my income, or it was basically my income. So I was gooey ducking happens Sunday through Tuesday. So I got 3 days I could just dedicate to making art. Yeah, and I didn't have to gooey duck every day or every time it came up. There were times I could not be on the water. So, just the ability to have that freedom
to do that
was just a huge blessing as well.
So I'm curious, you're talking about the variety of medium that you're learning, you're exploring. There's also, as you shared with me in an earlier conversation, there's then also a connection that you're starting to make with some of the designs that your mother, grandmother, and auntie were exploring in the Acoma culture. And then you've told me that you have been starting to, I don't know if the right word is integrate or emulate. To integrate would mean to put that design into other designs, but to emulate would be to kind of copy it for what it is. How have you received and welcomed that part of your heritage into the work you're doing?
Yeah. In 2021, the Institute for American Indian Arts, started this MFA, the Masters of Fine Arts for Studio Arts. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of the first cohort. So we're looking at, all this really amazing contemporary art. We're looking at, different communities. And, some of the work that we're doing is we look at ourselves and what are we doing with our work. And I never really paid too much attention to the Acoma side of my family, for artistically. And so I got the idea of using some of my mom's designs in the work that I create now. And while I was part of this program, there was still a lot of Salish art, a lot of Coast Salish ideas. But then I had this one piece, where I took one of my mom's designs and I instead of being on a 3D vessel, I created it in a linear form. And so you're seeing the whole design at once versus just, rotating it on a vessel.
Okay.
And then I got the idea to flip it around, to change the orientation of it, and to fit it into the space. And it really worked out, visually. And when I showed it, in one of my critiques, it was received really well. And so that gave me the idea of start to work more with Acoma design. So, after I graduated in 2023, I decided to work more with the Acoma side of my culture. So I developed what's called this Acoma reclamation project, where I'm reclaiming my Acoma identity through the work that I create. And so I started to study, more design and to get the flow for Acoma pottery. And so I started looking at a lot of my mom's work, my Auntie Elizabeth, my cousin Sharon.
With new eyes, I'm sure. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm looking at it with intention now, rather than just looking at the aesthetics of it. I'm looking at the composition, and the how do these designs mesh with each other? How do they fit?
Yeah.
What makes sense for Acoma pottery? And so to get an idea of contemporary design, I decided to start looking at what did my ancestors create, and so we've always gone to places like Chaco Canyon or Mesa Verde. And I've always admired the pieces that come out of those places. But then I started to study them and to look how my ancestors from there used design and how did their shapes mix in with each other.
Yeah.
And so it was just more in-depth study of not just my family work, but the ancestral works.
Because you had 18-ish years of Coast Salish study that you're really getting grounded in that cosmology, that spirituality, that design, and then you come into a whole nother place. And so my question that I was thinking about with this, I wanted to ask you about what is the role or the function of the contemporary indigenous artist in terms of adaptation? Are you expected to create and adapt, or how do you maintain connection with heritage and with lineage, but also adapt and innovate in ways that honor that, but also do the work that art does, which is to create new things? What is that like for you?
I think it's a process that you learn over time. You look at what other people are creating, and you realize there's only so many different shapes that we use for either Salish design or Acoma design, but it's a combination of how they're used, and that I can't say where that inspiration comes from, because I'm not just recreating what other people are doing. I'm trying to find a voice through Acoma design or through Salish design. So it I think it comes from the creator, or whatever my creator is bringing this inspiration, and it comes through my hands onto whatever medium I'm working with. So it's learning how to find that inspiration. Knowing where to look, and knowing how to translate what I see into something that I can make my own. So you're taking this voice from the ancestors and you're giving it a contemporary voice. So it's kind of hard to answer that.
Yeah, I believe that. I could see that, but I also really validate that you work from a place of community, past and present, and you even talk about. You say, I hope as I continue in my artistic career, I can pass on the teachings and nurturing spirit that have been shown to me. And that, I think, would be a part of what adaptation is, because it sounds like what you're wanting to do is to recognize what has been, but also to demonstrate who and what you are in that lineage.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I started singing in 2003, the leaders of the canoe or the drum group, they were more than happy to teach me the songs.
Mm-hmm.
And so when someone, who is new to our drum group, I always make them feel welcome, because that's what people did for me. And same thing with drum making. My cousin, she was like, yeah, sure, let's go make some drums. She had with no hesitation. And so when people ask me, it's like, do I want to teach a class on either paddle making, drum making, or people who want to learn how to sing songs, I make time to be available so I can do that, because that's what people did for me. And I just want to hopefully pass on a little bit of what I know to anybody, really. So, the Longhouse has asked me to do, paddle making workshops, for the community.
Yeah.
Not just for natives, but for non-natives as well.
Yeah.
University of Washington in Seattle, they've asked me to do some drum making workshops for the native scholars. And I've been more than happy to do that. So, they have a canoe family now. Oh. And so, the students there want to be involved. And, one of the easiest ways is to have the drum in your hand and to just beat, within, to take that and learn how to just, beat a drum to a song. You don't necessarily know how to sing. You don't need to know how to sing the song. But, to beat is, just got to watch. So,
yeah.
And so if I can pass that along to other people, it's just a legacy of what we do.
That's beautiful.
And that's how culture propagates itself. It's through people willing to teach.
And also students who are willing to listen and to actually receive, and then to move forward with it. Yeah, I'm thinking now. I'm kind of turning towards the views on Fifth Salmon installation. I'm thinking, okay, this is a project that was beyond the imagination of the ancestors, with buildings, right, and massive steel fish. But you clearly, shared your culture, your heritage, your skill in a way that now is like a public gift on that building. And so that is, just by the scale and by the blending of the technology, the lighting that I want to ask you about, and the way it's attached to the building, all of these are things that have to be created for the creation itself. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
Now this was happening. This installation was 2021. Is that right?
Yes. No. I want to say 2020.
2020.
Because I graduated from Evergreen in 2018, and right after graduation, I signed the contract for this installation. The developers and I had been talking about what they wanted on their building, and they had the idea of putting salmon up on that column. So they presented me with their conceptual drawing, and I go, all right, I know what they want out of there. And one of the developers said, I want this to be the piece that defines Olympia. And so I'm sitting there, in my living room, and I'm watching the Super Bowl. This is in February. And I'm watching the Super Bowl, and I start drawing these salmon designs, and I start orienting them in a way, like they're swimming upstream. And so you got these three salmon swimming upstream. The bottom salmon is swimming at the bottom of the pool, waiting to swim upstream, waiting to swim up the fish ladder. And I looked at it and I go, that's an exclamation point. So at the next meeting I had with the developers, I said, you wanted a piece that defines Olympia. Well, I'm giving you an exclamation point. And they fell in love with that idea. And so, we started, tightening up the designs. We started figuring out what color they wanted. And, I was like, we looked at the glass that they're using. They wanted it to blend in with the environment. And so I wanted a color that would complement the glass that they're using. So we looked at all these ideas. And, I wanted a piece that would have this durability, that would, outlive me. And so, using steel seemed like the obvious choice, because it is durable. It lasts forever. And with technology being what it is, having these full spectrum LED lights, they're supposed to last 30 years. And so that's the idea of having these backlit salmon, offset from the concrete. So, once we finalized the design, my problem was finding a place to fabricate these giant salmon.
They're enormous.
I mean, each salmon is 15 feet.
Yeah, I didn't get appreciation for that until there's a web page that we can link to that's kind of, it details it with photographs, and I started to get a sense of the scale of of how large they are.
Yeah. So, and nowhere locally was able to produce these pieces. So I had to go to Seattle. And, I found this group of fabricators, absolutely phenomenal work they do. And so, they put together these giant salmon. I had to source the lights. I was working with at least 2 different companies to try to find these LEDs. And so these lights were custom made for this project.
Wow.
And I wanted something, full spectrum, being able to, control the color, control the pattern, and something waterproof. And so, so we found this manufacturer out in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And then we got the computer for these LEDs, and it is amazingly complicated. I got the computer, and I started looking at the software. I started looking at tutorial videos. I started reading about it, and I had no idea what I was reading. I had no idea what I was watching. It was just way beyond me. And luckily, the Views on Fifth people, they had a IT guy.
Okay, good.
Who basically took like almost a year to learn how to run these lights.
Wow.
And he's done an amazing job. Every night it's a different pattern, it's different colors, and it's just amazing. And like I said, those went up in 2021 or 2020, and I'm still getting compliments about the lighting.
Oh yeah.
And it's all just working with the Views on Fifth developers.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it is emblematic of our city. It is becoming one of the focal points of the city. And I even wonder about, with the Deschutes and the way that the estuary there is going to change, and if that even could be like a welcome sign, up the sound, come on in, and because there's going to be big changes in our area in that right there in that region too, that are intended. They've been in consultation with the Squaxin to benefit the fish, and not just the fish, but the air, the water, all of that, and the salmon are such a central part of that whole process.
Yeah, no, I've been a big fan of getting rid of that dam. That whole Capitol Lake is just a environmental nightmare. The water is eutrophic. There's no oxygen in that water, so there's really no life in there, and what grows in there isn't beneficial. All the resident geese that are around here, all the shit goes into the lake, and the lake, because of that goose shit, it rises the temperature of the lake, and it affects the inlet here. When they release the water from the lake into the inlet, so all this bad water is going into Puget Sound now. And so it affects that ecosystem as well. So we're getting this horrible environmental disaster. And when I realized where these salmon were going to be placed, it's right next to the dam.
It is.
And so I started looking at it, and I was like, I want this to be a statement on habitat restoration. I wanted it to be a statement of the promise that we made to the salmon people, years and years ago. That story that we tell at our first salmon ceremony of the salmon making a decision to sacrifice themselves so that humans can survive. And the salmon said, "You need to remember the promise that you made. You promised to take care of the water. You promised to take care of the land." And with those promises, we're going to give our flesh to you. And so what happens is, whenever the first king salmon is caught, we take that salmon and we feed it to the community. So we have this first salmon ceremony out at Arcadia Point, where we take the flesh, we take the meat off the salmon, and we take the carcass back into the water. And so we treat this salmon with respect, and we let the salmon people know that we've kept our promise. We want to keep our promise to continue to honor the salmon people, so that we can survive.
Yeah.
And just learning more about salmon as a species. I've learned that they're a keystone species. Because they affect so much more than just whether people eat. A bear takes a salmon out of the water and it takes it into the forest.
Yeah. And
then that salmon breaks down, and the nutrients from the salmon go into the vegetation now. Or while it's breaking down, all these other scavenger animals come and take the salmon. Yeah. And so they're spreading the salmon nutrients even further into the forest. So if we don't have healthy salmon runs, we don't have healthy bear populations, we don't have healthy eagle populations. And then if there aren't any salmon to be dragged into the forest, we're not going to have any healthy forests. Yeah. And so once all these ecosystems start collapsing, it's going to be this huge domino effect. That's not just going to affect Western Washington or Washington. It's going to affect everybody.
Yeah. So that installation can be a statement of affirmation and thanks for the salmon. Yeah, that's beautiful. In my line of work, we have a phrase that says, "May it be so." And so I want to just affirm that vision and that dedication.
Well, the Lushootseed word is Acoma, so be it. So it's the same thing as let it be so.
Okay.
Acoma.
Okay, maybe offline I want to learn that with you, but thank you for that. So I want to begin to wrap up, but as we do with these sessions, we ask our guests, how do you define hope, and where are you seeing it or experiencing it? It's one thing to have like maybe a definition of it, but maybe it's better, if you want to prefer to name something you're seeing that's hopeful, and then have that be the way that you describe it. But we like to close with that invitation.
Well, when I think of hope, I think of a better future for the future generations. And so, how I'm doing that is by making myself available, as a knowledge keeper. And, to keep that knowledge means you're willing to pass it on to other generations. So always being welcoming to people who want to learn. That's my definition of hope, is that people are always learning. And there are always people willing to pass on that knowledge that we have. And so as long as there's, future generations that yearn for knowledge, that's hope for me right there.
I love that. And once again, it demonstrates that commitment to community that you've shared with us throughout your story. And there's so much more we could talk about, but we'll thank you for the time you've offered us today and the generosity of sharing about your story. You, all of us, we are works in progress, and the works that you will develop and continue to develop, we're excited to see in your journey. So thank you for the time you spent here today with us.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And thanks to everyone today who's tuned into this. Again, you can find past episodes from Lean in Olympia on our YouTube channel, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. Thank you so much for being here. Peace to all of you, and have a great rest of your day.